Have you ever noticed how the price of everyday items seems to creep up over time, or how a crisp $20 bill just doesn't buy what it used to? It's a feeling that resonates deeply with people across generations and borders, the relentless erosion of our money's purchasing power. We call this inflation, and while a little bit of it is a natural part of a growing economy, there's a far more insidious and destructive force at play when governments lose control. What we are going to uncover today is not just about rising prices, but about how governments destroy currency, the hidden inflation cycle, a process that, once understood, reveals a crucial truth about our financial world. At its heart, currency destruction isn't about literally shredding banknotes. It's about annihilating their value, the ability of that money to buy goods and services. Imagine a single pie. If you suddenly double the number of slices without making the pie any bigger, each slice is now half as substantial. This is a simple, yet powerful, analogy for what happens to money. When a government embarks on a path that leads to this outcome, it often begins with a fundamental imbalance, spending far more than it collects in taxes. Let's trace the hidden inflation cycle, step by step, as it unfolds. The journey typically starts with a government facing significant financial pressures. Perhaps there's a war to finance, a pandemic requiring vast emergency spending, or simply a long history of ambitious social programs without adequate revenue to support them. The government finds itself running a deficit, meaning its outgoings exceed its income. Traditionally, governments would borrow money to cover this gap by issuing bonds, which are essentially promises to pay back investors with interest. People, businesses, and even other countries buy these bonds, lending their money to the government. However, a critical juncture arrives when the government's borrowing becomes unsustainable. Interest rates on its bonds might soar because investors become nervous about the government's ability to repay, or there simply aren't enough willing lenders. At this point, a dangerous temptation emerges to create money out of thin air. This isn't done by a politician cranking a printing press, but through the central bank. The central bank, often under pressure or direct instruction from the government, starts buying up the government's debt, those bonds, not with existing money, but with newly created digital currency. This act fundamentally expands the total money supply circulating within the economy. Suddenly, there are many more units of currency, chasing roughly the same amount of goods and services. Initially, the effects might seem benign or even positive, as the economy feels a flush of new liquidity. But the consequence is inevitable. People and businesses now have more money, and as they spend it, demand outstrips supply, pushing prices upwards. This is the first noticeable wave of inflation. As prices rise, people start to lose faith in the currency's stability. They realize that the money they hold today will buy less tomorrow. This expectation fuels the next critical stage, the wage price spiral. Workers demand higher wages to maintain their living standards in the face of rising costs. Businesses, faced with increased labor costs, then raise their prices further to protect their profit margins. This creates a vicious cycle where wages chase prices and prices chase wages, each pushing the other higher and faster. The currency is losing value not just because there's more of it, but because people expect it to lose value, accelerating its destruction. Finally, a deep loss of confidence sets in. People no longer want to hold the local currency. They rush to convert their savings into more stable assets, like gold, real estate, or foreign currencies, or even resort to bartering for goods and services. The local currency becomes practically worthless, rejected by merchants and hoarded by no one. This is the ultimate destruction of currency, when it ceases to function as a reliable medium of exchange, a unit of account, or a store of value. Now let's touch upon the scientific explanation for why this happens. The core economic principle at play here is the quantity theory of money, often simplified as MV equals PQ. In this equation, M represents the money supply, V is the velocity how quickly money changes hands, P is the price level, and Q is the quantity of goods and services produced in the economy. When the government dramatically increases M, the money supply without a corresponding increase in Q, the actual goods and services available, and assuming V remains relatively stable or even increases due to fear, the P price level must rise. It's a fundamental law of economics, akin to gravity in physics. More money competing for the same amount of stuff inevitably makes the stuff more expensive in terms of that money. The psychological aspect is equally powerful. Once people anticipate inflation, their behavior changes dramatically. They spend quickly to avoid future price hikes, further increasing the velocity of money and exacerbating the inflationary pressure. This expectation, once ingrained, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, making the central bank's job of reining in inflation incredibly difficult, often requiring painful measures. For us, as individuals, understanding this cycle offers some practical wisdom. While we can't control government policy, we can be aware of the signs. Vigilance for sustained, large government deficits, coupled with central bank actions that seem to be financing these deficits through new money creation, are key indicators. In such environments, holding large amounts of cash can be a significant mistake, as its purchasing power rapidly diminishes. Diversifying investments into assets that traditionally hold value during inflationary periods, or even into stable foreign currencies, can be prudent. Conversely, for policymakers, the biggest mistake is often believing they can print their way out of a debt crisis without severe consequences, or underestimating the psychological tipping point where public confidence in the currency evaporates. Short-term political expediency often overrides long-term economic stability, leading down this destructive path. Ultimately, the destruction of currency through excessive money creation isn't a mysterious act of nature. It's a direct consequence of policy choices, often made under duress or through a lack of fiscal discipline. It reminds us that money, in its essence, is a promise of value, and when that promise is continually broken, the trust that underpins an entire economic system can collapse. Understanding this hidden inflation cycle isn't just an academic exercise. It's a crucial insight into the economic forces that shape our lives, our savings, and the future stability of nations. By appreciating how governments can destroy currency, we become more informed citizens and better equipped to navigate the financial landscape around us.